number of Venetians suffering mental breakdowns following the advent of the rent in the sky. All know that the unnatural phenomenon preys upon the mind. Few, however, understand the correlation between the new influx of magic and the effect on the human mind. The link between madness and magic was not always the main concern of the doctors that work in the Ospedale San Servolo. But since the rent in the sky tore apart the heavens, it has become their sole focus. The Ospedale San Servolo di Malate di Mente opened its gates in 1753. Funded by Doge Pietro Grimani through a lengthy campaign pitting nobles against each other in a contest of one-upmanship to show off who could be more magnanimous. Some also eager to be rid of the insane off the streets of Venice. Quickly, however, financial troubles would beset Dr. Andreas Nifo, the first director of the Ospedale. Full to capacity, and with the patron doge long gone, he turned to more unorthodox therapy. No one knows which family was the first to seek out the doctors in order to see one of their more problematic members interned in the Ospedale for treatment. It is rumored it was a young man who had committed the murder of a wealthy noblewoman in front of witnesses, almost certain to be sentenced to death if arrested and tried. Instead, he found sanctuary on San Servolo, and though the details were never publicly shared, other families soon had similar ideas. Over the years, a steady flow of wanted criminals, bastard children, troublesome but fondly regarded dowager aunts, and wealthy uncles have made residence, sometimes voluntarily, often not. Nifo would take on young nobles, teaching them the finer arts of modern medicine, becoming a university of sorts, many of whom would stay on the staff as doctors. With funding secured, Nifo turned his thoughts to other studies in an attempt to turn the Ospedale into a place of medical breakthrough. He was joined by a man named Force van der Kane. Charismatic and driven by his quest for knowledge, he quickly became Nifo's confidant and began to press for the pursuit of more esoteric areas of study. His interests extending beyond Western medicine, even dabbling into the realms where science meets with mysticism. Nifo and Kane's idyllic period of experimentation would not last, however. Kane would turn his attention further from traditional medicine and begin to delve into the occult. He slowly convinced Nifo that the future of the Ospedale was not in the physical realm, but in that of magic. The most important discovery that they made was the connection between negative emotions and magical potential. Kane had always suspected so, having seen instances of blood magic caused by the suffering of victims. They had discovered that pain and suffering, terror and sadness amplify the susceptibility of an individual to the background energy that permeates the world. Lunatics can perceive this force on occasion and even unconsciously use it in rare circumstances. At first, only the most insane would be used for research, but this would not last. While Kane tried to lead Nifo by the hand into his proposed methods, Nifo was unwilling to cross the line. Kane was all too willing to do. The deliberate torture of inmates was the limit, and his desire for knowledge not enough to turn his back on his medical code of ethics. Kane, however, had already passed the point of no return. Kane continued his studies in secret, recruiting others to help, eventually leading to a small sect of doctors drawn from the most sociopathic of recruits. But no secret is left untold on such a small island. Retribution was sure to be swift for such heinous acts. However, it was not to be. Nifo sickened overnight. Kane visited his old friend and emerged from the chamber with somber news. The head of the Ospedale was losing his mental faculties. A cell was set up separate from other inmates, and Kane was to treat his friend personally every day. In 1775, Dr. Force van der Kane took over as director of the Ospedale, and now unbound by the watchful eyes of Dr. Nifo, he pushed his arcane studies even harder, going so far as to incorporate them into the teaching curriculum. None can point to a single moment when the pursuit of knowledge overtook any moral concerns, but over time it changed implacably to one of investigation rather than cure. While the studies into magic sped up after the appointment of Kane, none could have prepared for the arrival of the rent in the sky and the effect it had on the residents of the asylum. Seconds before the cataclysmic arrival of the rent, the insane residents howled and screamed as if some imperceptible force was erupting within. The rent brought a flood of magic into the world, forever changing the way the doctor's studies would be conducted. In the aftermath of the rent, the Doge issued a plea to the doctors to travel in increased numbers to Venice to aid the survivors. The residents of the city were increasingly complaining about the effects of the rent on their health and mental well-being. Plague doctors roamed the streets once again. Their once fearsome visages, symbolizing death, quickly became a more welcome sight, representing hope among the populace that help was forthcoming, often free of charge. Meanwhile, the insane in the Ospedale became the largest source of research since Kane took over. The cells were bursting with madmen and women brought from the mainland daily. Magic flowed into the world. What was once a background noise was now a slow but steady trickle. The insanity housed in the Ospedale placed the doctors in the perfect place to study the new form of power. Most importantly, in this time came the discovery of housing magical energy by a disciple of Kane, Dr. Raffaele Cacciatore. In his studies of generating magical energy through the torture of inmates, he developed a way to store the power. The insane were to be used as vessels to channel etheric energies, becoming batteries or conductors of magical energy. This energy was captured by gem-like crystals implanted in individuals and tuned to their mental frequency. Some madmen reacted in astonishing ways to the crystals, sprouting tentacles and other appendages, dagger-like fangs and maw-like openings across their bodies. The doctors have been unable to replicate the effect in any predictable way, but are happy to use the unfortunate souls known as the Unleashed when they occur. By day, the doctors maintain an air of benevolence. However, by night, the doctors will return to Venice, often to the very places their colleagues were treating that very day. Their excursions are partly to put their latest experiments into practice, partly to abduct unwilling participants, and for more reprehensible goals. The doctors have long been playing games in Venice, their plans stretching far and wide, but the doctors are careful to maintain the utmost secrecy. capable of magically concealing their true nature and often hunting down any who do spy them in the city on a mission. Many parties will take a collection of orderlies to the city with them to clean up afterwards. Even the corpses have much to teach the doctors, and the use of carrion, madmen implanted with surgical tools and psycho-indoctrinated to carry away victims. These twisted creatures have broken limbs, refashioned into twisted forms, all the better for scurrying down tight alleys and climbing buildings. There's no way to know exactly what the doctors are experimenting on, nor the extent of the depravity going on in the cells of the Ospedale. The guild has tried to infiltrate San Servolo many times since its opening, but all excursions have met with dead ends. Few agents will even attempt a mission anymore, as although the doctors themselves are looked upon kindly in Venice, the Ospedale has been a terrifying place for many years. It seems that every citizen in Venice knows a friend or a friend of a friend who has been interred there and will never again see the light of day. Whether the Doge himself knows the goings-on behind the tall walls is a mystery, but he is sure to know that the city will gain much more out of a positive relationship with them than otherwise. With the cells of San Servolo no longer enough to house the residents, the doctors are working on a massive expansion of the Ospedale. Madness is rife under the rent in the sky, but believe me when I tell you, traveller, that if you feel a twinge of sadness, a modicum of despair, or a twitch of madness, hide it and keep your eyes open as you stroll along the canals at night. For those footsteps you hear behind you may belong to a doctor coming for you.